Hello ladies and gentlemen, again here I'm going to show you another video tutorial about the crystal brush, my entry. In that case I want to show you how I painted the skin on that elf. The idea to paint the skin, remember, always I said the same, be careful, because sometimes you try to paint the skin with a lot of contrast and you forget that you have to paint a smooth surface. Smooth doesn't mean with a low contrast. You have to paint with a high contrast, like a satin result. You need to create a satin finish, but you have to create a smooth area, a smooth skin. Because if you create, for example, a high contrast between the highest light and the darkest shadow together, you will create something really sharp and then will look like an armor. Always I said the same. Be careful with that, because sometimes when you paint the skin like another armor. Just that, you want to think, or you feel that you want to create a lot of contrast on every muscle, on everything. You want to represent 17 layers with a lot of contrast, but this is a mistake. You have to represent the skin with a high contrast, with a satin finish, but you have to create something more organic, soften, okay? So that means you have to represent every volume smooth. You have to think more about the cylinders or spheres better than try to think about a cube. What means when I said a cube? Because sometimes you paint the highest light, you move the light to the top, and then you represent the shadow close together, the highest light and the highest or the deepest shadow. And the result looks like an armor, like a scratch, something like that, like a hard surface. So please, you have to represent something more organic. How you can represent something more organic? Every layer you have to create a contrast, but you have to represent this contrast with smooth layers. And then the result, you will have a light, but you need to think about a cylinder, just moving the light to a one point. In that case, if you see the video tutorial, you will see that, for example, on the leg, I try to move all the time the light going to the hand. Why? Because you need to separate everything, right? You have to create an outlining between different materials and different stuff. In that case, the hand and the leg is the same material, right? So you have to find a different way to create an outlining, because if you represent just an outlining with a dark color, maybe on the hand it's okay because it looks like a shadow, but if you create an outlining with light, like a light lining, I said, between the hand and the leg, will look weird. So to fix that, my idea is just move the light trying to touch the hand. Okay, you have to move all the time the light, every layer with a smooth surface, moving to the hand. So the idea is focus the light like on a cylinder, like a geometric shape. Okay, you move the light close to the center of the cylinder, the center of the leg, and moving the next layers close or near to the hand. And you will use these last lights to represent the outlining with light. Remember, outline in English, always everybody say to represent a dark lining. This is the outlining. But to me, sometimes I create fake outlinings with light. For that I said light linings, because you have to draw this. But you can't draw a line on the skin, because as I said, you have to paint smooth, okay? For that, the idea is move the area with the highest lights close to the hand, just to represent something between the hand and the leg. You will create these mid-tones with a high contrast to represent that one part is hand and the other one the leg, because sometimes you don't know how to represent this and looks the same, looks like melt, and you don't want to melt your hand on your leg. So the idea, when you paint, for example, now on the screen, you can see I'm painting the head, the face. When you want to paint something like this, like an elf, for example, or something like a female or something younger, try to represent exactly the same. You need to represent a high contrast, like satin finished, but you need to paint bigger areas. You don't need to focus the attention or focus the light in tiny points, tiny areas, because then it will look weird. So you need to create a flat surface, will look like a flat surface, but with a high contrast. How you can get this? On this video tutorial you can see that I'm painting a lot of layers with a low contrast, but every layer higher and higher and higher. With this, I can represent every muscle, every volume on the face, but looks more like soft, like flat. If you want to represent not a lot of wrinkles or volumes, at the end, because the miniature, it's a 54 millimeters, is smaller than usually I show you in another video tutorials, could look weird, okay? Be careful with that. Please, if you paint a lot of wrinkles, a lot of volumes with a high contrast, each one, you can understand everything together, all the face together. At the end, everything will have, for example, if you are painting with 5 layers, at the end, everything, every muscle, everything, muscle, skin, details like lips, nose, the forehead, everything on the face looks with 5 layers. At the end, everything will look the same. So you can't paint on that way. You have to understand that everything works together and paint a soft layers to get this high contrast, but everything together. That means if you paint with 5 layers, you will paint the 5 layers just in 1, 2 points, maybe 3, just highlights, just that. But the rest of them you have to paint maybe with 3, just that, or maybe 4, because sometimes less layers means better, means more. Why? Because if everything have 5 layers, at the end you have exactly the same light. You forgot the mid-tones in some moments. So this is a copy trick. Sometimes less layers means mid-tones. Just that. One tip I can give you for that. If you paint, if you think that you have to paint with 5 layers because you need to create this high contrast, paint with 5 layers, right? Easy. You have a high contrast, looks like satin, everything is smooth, perfect. But then, if you want to represent something more interesting, some areas with mid-tones, with different lights, this is my tip. In some areas with less information or they are not so important, you can paint just with 4 layers. Just that, 1 layer less. And at the end, the result will look different because you didn't paint with the same light. Will look like you painted with a lot of light, but not the same. So the result will be that you make different midtones, just that. Then, areas where you need to focus something else, more intention, more light, something else. For example, the face, because always I said that some interesting parts on a miniature will be the face and then the hands. If you paint the face super awesome, perfect. And then if you paint the hands awesome too, will be great. And if you are painting a medieval miniature, fantasy, a warrior, something like that, I recommend you paint very nice the weapon, because usually people watch the weapons too, just that. But the most important, remember, the face. Then the hands. That means if you had painted with 5 layers, you have to paint with 6 or 7 only on the head, just that, on the face. To focus, just will be tiny layers, I know, because you don't have enough area and you need to paint something else. It's just highlight points, just that. This is your 6th layer. And if you need something else, 7, just that. And this is a trick to control the midtones and lights. Okay? If in some moments you can't watch very well this video tutorial, it's because the spear it's blocking the view. Sorry, because we wanted to show you everything about this project, because it's our crystal brush. This is huge project and I want to show you everything. You have to keep the attention on everything, right? You need to see all the details. For that reason, I would like to show you better everything. And in some parts, just for the spear, I can show you perfectly. So we'll block a bit the view. But you see how I use the brush, how I work on that area. For example, now you can see on the screen that I'm using only the point of my brush. That means that sometimes you can work with brush strokes, easy brush strokes, normal, right? Just a 1-2 brush strokes. But then you can create different brush strokes only with the point of your brush. This is a different trick. You will have more control trying to create these thin lanes to represent these brush strokes. Why? Test with that. It's a different way to paint. You can paint with all the body of your brush or just with the point of the brush. In some moments I work with both. Sometimes it's interesting to create gradients. Keep a bit of texture, but just a bit, and then it's super easy to blend over it with the airbrush or just blend with a technique I explained in another video tutorials. Is just use the same color you are using now, because remember you have to have a uniform base coat with the next layer, right? With the next capibase. But if you add a bit of water on that, it's not like a glaze, it's between a capibase and a glaze, okay? You will have a lot of paint in this dilution. It's just add more water, just that. And start in the previous layer, in the darkest area, and going up to the light, to this new layer. And keep the drop with paint in the area where you are working with the same color, so you won't make mistakes. It's to blend a bit, just that. It's just to give you a key easier to blend at the end with the airbrush, just that. In some moments with the leg, you will see these tricks. For example, now on the face, you can see how I use the point of my brush just to control better the brush strokes. Remember, at the beginning, geometric shapes, easier to understand, but then you have to represent every muscle, every detail, so you have to keep attention. At the end, these geometric shapes will be more and more confused, harder to paint, right? But don't worry, as always I told you, don't feel stressed. Don't be afraid, just paint, enjoy, because this is your hobby, so you have to have fun painting models. If you paint more models, at the end you will see the feedback. If you can't finish a model, never you will have a feedback or a miniature to compare and see this feedback. Okay, so please enjoy painting. The most important key or tip I can give you. Enjoy painting, and just step by step you will see your improvement. Remember, if you see the face, I'm painting so tiny with a smooth layers, with a low contrast, but if you see, looks like a flat with volumes. So this is my tip. You have to represent these kind of faces like that. Why I paint with this kind of technique? More thinking about everything and trying to paint more smooth than usually I paint, just because this is for crystal brush and I need to paint with my 100% of quality, of level. So for sure, you can paint as always I explain you, but if you want something else, this is the project to learn something else. You can create this mix with capibases, but with a low contrast. Okay, this is the trick. If you paint with 3 layers, you will go directly to the light, and maybe you will forget some midtones, something in the middle, because it's like a pixel. If you have more pixels, you can create more details, more information, more midtones. With this is exactly the same. If you paint with capibases, but with a low contrast between each of them, and you paint with 7, will be easier to control the blending, to get a smooth surface just with the brush, to control more the midtones, everything. And on the leg, as you see, I'm moving the light touching the hand, super close, near to the hand. Why? Because I want to represent this outlining with light, this light lining, but never with a perfect line. We look weird, right? If you have a perfect line on the head or on the leg. On the skin, you should be technical, but you need to understand that everything should be look smooth, but with a high contrast. And always I explain you that you have to think about roof, about caps with the painting. Why? Because in that case, if you see the screen, you will see that I'm painting with this kind of pink color, with magentas, skin tones, but with a lot of pink or red or magenta, right? Why? Because if you decide your ceiling will be perfect, because at the end, you will control much better the highest light. For example, if you use pure white, maybe you have a perfect control with the pure white. You can understand everything. But maybe you are painting the skin and the model is wearing, I don't know, silk clothes. And you have to represent something satin from the silk, right? So if you couldn't decide or create a ceiling for that, maybe at the end, the silk and the skin could be look the same, with the same light, the same contrast, maybe the same colors. So be careful with that. If you decide a ceiling for your skin, perfect, this is your ceiling. And then, for example, if you use the pink I used, then you can respect or use pure white on ivory or pale flesh, something like that, to represent the highest light on the silk. Just to represent different materials. Remember, sometimes less is more. If everything have the same light, the same contrast, the silk, skin, and other materials will look the same. So never you can work with exactly the same lights. But as always I said, this is my way to paint, my tips. I enjoy painting that way. So I don't want to say that you have to do that. For sure, you can follow everything that you want. You want to learn something from here, perfect. On this video tutorial, I want to focus attention only on the skin because I think it's super important. Every model have a skin. And sometimes you focus all your attention on the non-metallic metal, the non-metallics, because you love them. But then you forget that you have to paint with the same quality, the skin. For sure, never will have the same light. But that means that you have to keep the attention on the skin, exactly the same attention you focused on the non-metallics, but with the different contrast. Just that. Please. I've seen a lot of models with awesome non-metallics, but then the skin is not with the same level and looks weird to me. So for that, non-metallics are really nice, but once time you understand how to paint them, it's just repeat exactly the same. But the skin works completely different if the skin have makeup, if the skin have wet, if the skin have different lights or different muscles. works completely different. So something organic is harder to represent than a hard surface. Hard surface like a weapon, like an axe or like a sword, once time you understand how to paint them, is click. It's just super easy to paint them. You will discover. Can you see these lights? I'm moving super close to the hand, just there. And the skin looks like half a high contrast, but with a smooth surface. Like blending. And I didn't use the airbrush, it's just capibases. Can you compare now one leg with the other one? This is the idea. And if you move the highest light close to the deepest shadow, it's exactly you can see now on the screen. So please don't work on that way if it's not like that. If it's not like that. And for sure, because this model is to the crystal brush, I keep the attention on everything. The elbows too. It's super important. Paint them. Everybody loves them. It's like the ears. I always said, nobody cares. It's fake. Everybody loves the ears. So you have to focus attention to paint them well. And as you see, I always said the same. You have to paint everything together. If you watch all the video tutorial, you will discover that I've painted the face, the legs, hands, arms, everything. But then I painted again the head, the legs, everything with the next layers. Why? Because if you focus all your attention to paint just the head at the beginning, and it's perfect, awesome, but then you paint the skin, the rest of the skin, and you don't know why, you feel more comfortable painting the skin, and you paint with higher contrast, with more light, then the face have less contrast than should be. So please paint all together, okay? So this was everything. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video tutorial. Next time we'll paint more the face and more stuffs. So thank you very much for all your support and to see these video tutorials. See you in the next one. Bye bye.